Murphy, and these are the Ontario Provincial Honor Band mallet percussion scales. Now, as you'll notice, as I am playing each of these different scales, I'm keeping my mallets low, not using any of my arm, and making sure that in each of my strokes, I have bounce. Now, what's really important to playing fast or playing evenly is to make sure you practice slowly first, and make sure that every single one of your strokes goes down and right back up properly. You don't want to be stroking like this or hitting the drum like that, or you may end up breaking a bar or breaking your wrist. So make sure to practice slowly, and with slow practice, proper practice, practicing the proper technique and making sure each mallet comes up, you'll be able to eventually play it like this. And that all just comes from practicing very slowly. And remember, I do say it does come back up, but make sure when it comes up, it doesn't go up more. This is called a stroke with prep, and it's what a lot of mallet players try to avoid. There's nothing wrong with it, but when you're practicing slow, make sure to practice with just the bounce. Now, when playing arpeggios of any sort, make sure you're starting on a hand where you'll actually be able to not have to reach over. So, for this A flat major, by starting on my right hand, I can avoid any awkward crossovers. And when you practice as well, make sure that you practice it slowly, and with each practice note, the hand's already ready for the next note that you're going to hit. If you practice like this, then you'll eventually be so used to moving quickly that it's only a matter of time that you'll be able to play it quickly. Now, when rolling on a mallet instrument, a lot of people have this weird thought that it's something that's really fast and, well, I guess really loud. See, if you play it like that, you'll not only create an ugly sound on whichever instrument you're playing, but you'll be so tired by the end of it, you won't be able to finish your audition tape. So a really smart thing to do when rolling is to make sure that they're slow, relaxed, and just sound even. And it'll probably impress people more if you're using different various speeds of rolls. But note, this is also to a metronome at 72 apparently, so make sure you don't overdo it. For arpeggios, make sure it's just like that, but make sure that when you're leading, the last note that strikes, when the last note strikes, the other hand is already at the next note. So if you're doing your left hand or right hand, whichever one's leading, is already at the place it wants to be. And in this way, it'll sound and look 100 times more even. Now, one more thing before I move on. A lot of people feel like when you're playing, that everything should be really loud, including the beginning. beginning of scales. It's important that you try not to accent any of the notes and just keep everything even, unless an accent's written in. Thank you. Hello, my name is Michael Murphy. Now, when playing any mallet audition, there are a couple of little cheat things or little rules that you can do or use to make your music sound better than anyone else's. Now, this may sound a little egotistical, but it's kind of true. Here's example one of what I did. Now, what I just did was a little thing I like to cheat with called following the line, which is actually a very important sight reading skill in professional musicians. When reading any sort of music, usually on a mallet instrument, when you go up, you're going to go a little bit louder, and when you go down, you'll go quieter. Now, the only reason for this is because it sounds more natural. Now, following this first line, by doing something like that, you can do something that's also a cheat called faking legato. See, as a percussionist, we can't really play legato like other instruments can. We don't have any tuning we can get rid of because we're hitting things with sticks. But by doing something like following the line, we can actually pretend that we can play legato. And by doing that, you'll make your audition 100 times better, and your musicality might be better, but you'll be playing much better. Now, looking to the rest of the music, something else I did is something I like to call using a little bit of artistic license. So basically, as a musician, you kind of get to play the music however you want to. I mean, if you wanted to, you could play it fast, but there's something called taking too much artistic license. Now, what you want to do is take a little bit to impress them enough that you can make your own music, but not do it so much that you completely change the music. So, like I did I added a little retardando, and by doing something like that, you can make your music sound more musical and give it a little bit of twist and your own personal touch. Now, when doing something such as bar 5 to the end, if you've noticed something that I did is actually doubled the top note. Now, doubling notes is actually something that's very common in any percussion thing. So don't feel like no matter what you play, that you have to always do left, right, left, right, left, right. Sometimes it's easier, just like when doing arpeggios. By doing something like this, by doubling the notes in my right hand, I don't have to do this. And by doing this, it will help your playing a lot more. Thank you. Hello, this is Ontario Provincial Honor Band, Etude Set B for snare drum. Now, before we start, something really important to note is how you actually go to and start playing the snare drum. Now, I've seen many people, especially rockers, play like that, where they'll grab the sticks and dig it into the drum. Now, an important thing to know is that all percussion, no matter what it is about relaxation. So if you hold your sticks like this, you can't play something like. So the first step to playing this snare drum is to get relaxed. So pretend you're washing your hands under a faucet. You're shaking it out. Now, right here where my right hand is, that's a pretty good playing height for me. I'm just going to throw that stick in there. And now, my arm's completely relaxed. And with this, I can play pretty much anything that I'm physically able to. So, now that we're kind of relaxed, as you'll notice something on here, I actually do have a credit card sitting on the snare drum. Now, the only reason I have this here is because without the credit card, you'll hear something like this. As you can kind of hear, the snares are ringing. It's a little bit of a trashy sound. So by putting a card, a small piece of cloth, even if you wanted to, put your cell phone, you will mute the sounds of the snare and the ringing that comes with it. Now, you can experiment with different things to use. Each thing you use will have a different sound and effect to the snare. So that will be something to think about. Now, as far as placement of the snares towards you or where you are on the drum, you'll always want to have the latch in front of you. So when you're playing, you'll always have easy access to turn it off. And make sure when you're playing anything off, the snares are always off because you will hear a ringing. Now, I'm keeping the snares here because of the snare drum and aesthetic reasons, but otherwise, make sure you do it. When playing any snare drum etude, you want to make sure that, first of all, you're playing with the right technique, but you're also following the line and following dynamics. So, starting from the beginning of this etude, it starts pretty obscurely. No one can really know what the time is, except for you, because you're going to be counting. But to help the auditioner or listener better, you can kind of add a little bit of pulse, or a little bit of lead-in. And by doing something like that, you can kind of establish that something's going on, you're in charge, and that everything's going pretty great. Now, as far as dynamics go, a trick on the snare drum is, as you actually move from the center to edge of the drum, you can change dynamics using the same strength. So, when playing different dynamic things, such as crescendos or just pianissimo lines, you can play everything down here. Or, if you want to make things a little bit more difficult for yourself, you can play all the pianos in the center of the drum. But most professional snare drummers will use both sides of the drum, and by both sides, of course, I mean center to edge. Now, going from bar 9, we have a 4-bar crescendo into bar 13. Now, what's important about crescendos, or crescendi, is that when you do them, stay at the quiet dynamic as long as possible, and keep the crescendo to the very end for a dramatic effect. And by doing something like that, your performance, your sound quality, and everything's already significantly probably better. Now, looking on in the etude. I'll be going from bar 18. Now, I made a couple mistakes here, but you can just ignore those for now and pay attention to what kind of dynamic and technique I'm using. See, as following when you have 16th notes or any quick little, let's say, segment that comes into a piece in 6/8, it's important to make it as crisp as possible. So instead of doing, you want to make sure it's really crisp. And not as dull. Now, moving on again, flams. I've noticed a lot of people do slow flams. But no matter how slow or quick you play this piece, the flam will always sound. And a good exercise for this actually is doubles in each hand and then make them collide. Now, as far as rolling goes on the snare drum, we have basically two kinds of rolls, which is the double stroke, which is two in each, and the buzz or closed roll. Now, many people also use a triple stroke roll. But sped up, that's also a buzz roll. Now, let's go to bar 21. And let's try it with both double stroke and buzz rolls. Now let's try it with double stroke. Now, I think in this case, either type of stroke or roll is pretty decent, and both have a completely different feel. Depending on how crisp you want to sound, or marching, or however kind of style you want to go with, you want to probably experiment with using both types of rolls. So if you're playing, you could do potentially just practice at and try to figure out through that which ones you want. Now, an important part of percussion playing, or playing solo, is that the audience, auditioner, or panel is going to remember the beginning and the end of the piece more than anything. So make sure you master the first couple bars and the last couple bars. Make sure those are the first things you learn. Some people actually like to work backwards from the bottom up. That's because the audition will hear the last part at the very end, and it'll be what they remember. Thank you.
Cool.
Cool. Timpani, this is the timpani scale. Now, as far as timpani playing, and specifically the scale goes, the important thing is that this is kind of a pedal exercise. So while you're changing notes, make sure you're hitting it at the same time so you can forget about this sound. Because when you're playing any audition, no one wants to hear that. Unless it's written in the music, the sounds of the pedals should not be heard much. Now, as far as timpani technique goes, that's something I'm going to have to tell you to do, because there are about 7 techniques that I know about alone. But I know just a quick thing. German plays down, almost like snare drum. French play with thumbs and they push. Hinger plays with the rotation of the wrist. And Duff, which I use, plays with wrist down. This is Ontario Provincial Honor Band Etude Set B for timpani. on the timpani is that playing position is, you want to make sure you're not playing in the center, too close to the edge, but you want to make sure you're playing about a third of the way in. And this will give you probably the best and clearest tone on the timpani. Now there are effects where one might use that, those will be written in pieces. Now as far as crescendo or crescendi and decrescendi go on timpani, you can either do it by just lowering the height, or you can move in, or I've seen people even move out. Now these are both very viable options, though they do both sound different. Now, another important thing to note is that when you have rudiments such as roughs, you won't want to play it like a snare drum. Instead, you're going to have to alternate it. And with this, you get a clearer sound. Now, one of the trickiest parts of this edition is from bar 27 to the end, where it does. Now, the reason this is tricky is because you're swapping from triplets right into 16th notes. Now, some people might not notice the difference, but such as in areas such as bar 16 leading to the section into 20, you have to make sure that the difference in the different rhythms is very well known. And by making it as clear as possible that the rhythms differently, you'll make your edition 100 times better than anyone else's. Thank you.
And we don't care.